Good morning, everybody. Between the headlines. Gosh, it's been a while, hasn't it? I can't remember the last headlines show that we did. And these are fun shows for me because we get to vent a little bit, don't we? Because we're constantly being bombarded by all this nonsense in the headlines and in the media. And we get to kind of laugh a little bit and talk about how ridiculous all this is, right? So these shows are fun. If you're new to the channel, we try to do this, once every week, a couple times a week. Sometimes we'll get on a roll. We'll do 2 or 3 headline shows. Other times, we'll not do any for a while, which is exactly what happened this time. We got into some rabbit holes. We started finding syringes all over the planet. And so it's been a wild ride, hasn't it? So welcome back, everybody. And I said a few days ago that we would be seeing umbrellas manifesting out of thin air on the world stage, didn't we? We talked about that. Was it yesterday's show or the day before? We're like, yeah, we expect to see more umbrellas everywhere because we had found this secret code that umbrellas were synonymous with syringes. Well, the controllers did not disappoint, as Bunter Hyden comes out of hiding on Easter with his picture here with this prominent umbrella displayed right next to him. Now, people can say, oh, this is just a chance this is happening. No, this is intentional. Let's take a closer look at this umbrella. Wow, it looks like a Z pattern, doesn't it? Like World War Z. So here they are. This is what they do. There's no way they would have used this picture with this prominent umbrella in it, cropped like this. They would have just taken a picture of him or used a different photo, but instead they used the one with the umbrella. Weird times, right? Now, we're going to get into some more headlines later in the show so that we can get all caught up. But first, I want to talk about the new Smack the Nation strategy moving forward and how we are just continuing to be manipulated and put in fear and basically gaslighted. Now, as many of you know, I spent a full career of 15 years in pharmaceutical and PCR testing sales. PCR is polymerase chain reaction, and worked in several diagnostic laboratories in the sales department. And this is what I did for 15 years of my life when my children were younger. Now, I've shared a lot of these stories with you guys over the years of the behind the scenes of that experience, because there was a lot going on during those years. A lot of revelations actually were revealed during those years that later I would realize had very far-reaching significance to my current work and helping to expose some of this stuff. And it related directly to what we're experiencing right now at the tail end of this spam-demic. Now, make no mistake, we're not really at the tail end. They're telling us they are, but they're just getting us ready for the next phase. These things ebb and flow. They give you a little bit of a break, and then they fire these things back up. It might not be next year or the year after. It might not be 5 or 7 years from now. But make no mistake, we will be going through this again, and it will probably be twice as intense. So it's kind of shocking to me how life continues to come around full circle, doesn't it? Because this industry that I was in helped shed some light on some of the things that we're going through right now. Anyway, I wanted to talk a little bit today about sales training. And I went through several levels of very intense sales training in pretty much every position that I was in. Basically, you would start over and they would send you through their sales training courses. Usually there was level 1, level 2, and level 3. And I had several jobs over the years. And during these training sessions, it was like almost an entire week, sometimes 2 weeks of training, far away from home. And it was really intense. There was daily quizzes and testing. The minute you came in the next morning, you were tested. And you were basically, told that, you had to pass that test or you would wash out of the program. And it got to the point where I saw so many people drop out of these sales training, courses just because it was too much pressure for most people. And I got to the point where I started joking about it and calling it like I was on an episode of Survivor, because that's literally what it felt like. Because sales were very competitive. Now, my particular position was in Santa Barbara, which was in even more competitive territory. Now, I didn't realize that at the time. I just thought, I live here and got the job here, and this is just what I do. But in hindsight, I realized that territory was well sought after, and that many people who I thought were my friends and coworkers, they were making a play for my job. And in the end, I was laid off several times because of this kind of drama. And the companies don't care. You're the sole provider for your wife and your children. You got a mortgage. They don't care. They just kick you to the curb. So after a while, this Survivor joke that I used to tell quickly turned into a meat grinder joke, because that's what it pretty much became. And believe it or not, my journey to awaken to the truth was forged out of these experiences, because I realized that nobody cares about us. They pretend that they do when they recruit you. They tell you, oh, you're a valuable asset, and they interview you, and you go through all these stages, and you think, wow, they must really like me. And then you tell them you want a long-term commitment, and they say they do too, and they send you all this training, and then they send you through their meat grinder and have you scrambling to figure out a way to meet your obligations in your life after they toss you to the curb, usually with no kind of warning. Now, many of you will remember a woman by the name of Brandy Vaughn, and she mysteriously died of a ruptured gallbladder, so we're told, just before the spam-demic started. Now, Brandy was one of the most effective truthers out there in getting the word out about Smack the Nations, because she had personal experience. She was well versed. She came from the industry like myself. In fact, her role was almost identical to mine. Different products she sold, but literally the same role. In fact, back in the early years, I ran into Brandy a few times. And she spent her whole life fighting against Smack the Nations, didn't she? And she tended to focus more on the clinical side of things. Now, I want to talk more about the sales side of the story, because it's duly important, and that's what's going to segue into some of these headlines we're going to cover today, is the side of this where they are brainwashing you, the sales rep, the patient, as well as the doctor. Literally, our job was to brainwash the doctors. That was our job. And one word comes to mind when I think about this, and that is the word institution. What is institution? Well, institution is this obscure, dominant entity that you can never really put your finger on, that controls the minds and behaviors of doctors and how they prescribe. It controls the minds of patients who receive these medications. And sometimes they can tell a lie straight to your face, with a straight face, in plain sight. And because of the word institution, people ignore it. What is the institution made up of? Well, formulary, which is, what is the formulary? It's the list of drugs that a doctor is allowed to use. Doctors can't just prescribe any drugs they want. They have to prescribe from a formulary most times, which is it's like a menu of drugs that they're able to prescribe that are covered by particular insurances that they're contracted with. Even something as simple as the selection of drugs that come to market during a specific time period, that becomes part of the institution, because there's only so many you're allowed to use and so many that are researched by the companies. It is not true to say that only the best drugs ever make it to market. That's not the case. It's the drugs that will make them money, not drugs that actually cure things or could cure things that are the ones that actually make it to market. So again, institution. Now, believe it or not, another aspect of all this is the education system, because a lot of these pharmaceutical companies will fully invest into the education systems. They have contracts and things like this for birth control, whatever else, so that they can seed in their influence into these educational systems. Also, many of these doctors are part of medical associations. Again, another set of rules, another institution that controls their behavior. Now, it's crazy because we'd walk around with these white paper studies, we called them. And I thought about the psychology behind a white paper study. You got this piece of paper, we usually put it in a piece of plastic, and it was a study that said our drug was safe and efficacious. And anytime a doctor doubted that, we'd pull out the study and go, in a study of 500 individuals, we found that there was 95% efficacy and safety of our drug. Side effect profile was minimal and blah, 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 right? And our main job was to lead with these studies. And I began to think of the psychology behind this. Black and white. And that's the way they want you to think. It's either black or white. And it has a sense of authority to it, the way it's written in this scientific format. It's very intimidating. And I can go on and on about the psychology behind a white paper study. It basically is a legal document that pressures the doctor into a particular behavior by saying that we've already done the research and this is the proof. And if you don't believe the proof, then you're thinking outside of the box. You're thinking outside of the paradigm and all the rules that are set up in this institution. And if you go outside of that, you might not be a doctor that should have a license. Now, it's interesting because a lot of this coercion and gaslighting that is done against these doctors, it's weighted toward doctors who are trying to do the right thing. It's weighted against them. Whereas here we saw, some of these doctors who were doing the wrong thing that were propped up by companies like, for instance, that made Oxy and stuff like that. I used to go in and call in these pain doctors because I used to sell a drug called Avenza, morphine sulfate. And I was trying to get the doctors to prescribe Avenza. Now, we weren't allowed to say that this is a non-habit for me or non-addicting. We weren't allowed to say that, but the inference was that the formulation was a sustained release. Because a lot of people would abuse these drugs by crushing or chewing these things, and then they would get like a high from it or whatever. So there was a gauntlet of many, many aspects of this position that I want to share with you guys so you can understand the psychology behind all this and why a doctor could do something that we would be like, how was that even possible? That person's supposed to be a doctor. And they do it because the institution says they can do it at the time. And that's what happened with pain management. Because they were given the green light with white papers and the institution said, go ahead and do this. This is why they did it. And there were a lot of kickbacks. So the pain doctors were making money hand over fist. And so what's the incentive when you're doing something that's making you a lot of money? You want to keep doing it, don't you? The next thing you know, some of these pain doctors had hundreds and thousands of patients on these kinds of drugs. Now, Truth, Fears, No Scrutiny says Brandy was controlled opposition. I know for a fact she wasn't. Yes, she appeared on some of these shows that I wouldn't appear on, but she was a baby to the truth community. She did not know. She had not been awake very long. So to say that to the only person in our community who was effective at actually getting the word out, she spent copious amounts of her own money putting up billboards. She gave talks all over the U.S. Who else is doing that? Most of us just like to complain, don't we? But Brandy was actually doing something about it. So for you to say that is offensive to me. Now, you're allowed to say that. I'm not going to block you for that. But that's offensive to me because I actually personally knew her. That's why she's gone today, because she was too effective. And I think over time she would have woken up to all of this and the games and all the people that were trying to get her to go on her show that were controlled opposition, like Alex Jones and stuff. And she would have woken up to that after she got burned a couple times, and she would have maybe made her own channel and did things differently. But in the beginning, she was trying to get the word out. Now, I was shocked, and I don't want to stir up drama here, but I had a big truther come onto this channel. Huge truther. You guys know who she is. I'm not going to say her name. Come on here and try to say that she knew Brandy personally in the last days and that she was paranoid and delusional. And I looked at this truther's channel. I go, look at your videos. What have you done? What had you done to protect children, child by child, from getting the thing? And all that channel ever did was complain. They never put up billboards. They never did speeches in front of thousands of people or hundreds of people to wake them up to what this stuff is doing. And so that the fruit is what tells it all. The fruit is what tells it all. And you can still see bits and pieces of Brandy's legacy over the internet, but most of it has been scrubbed. But the reason why I even brought her name up is because we were in similar roles. Again, she was more on the clinical side of things. She was really good at presenting the information, scientific side to why these things are bad. And I want to tell you the sales side of it, because I try to pick up on a lot of this stuff while I was in it. Something told me to keep a close eye on this whole thing going down. You guys, I grew up in the hood. And so here I found myself in this world. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. They just bought Sinbad out onto the stage and he just did a comedy routine for us. How much did that cost? Whoa, this is crazy. They just had an Apollo astronaut give us a speech. And I was just taking it all in going, I need to remember this because this doesn't happen every day in companies. And so I'm glad I did take notice because now I can share all that with you guys. So let's keep going with this because there's a lot I want to say about this, about the institution of all of this and how you can find a doctor or a nurse in a certain position doing something that we're from the outside looking in going, I can't believe you just did that. And trying to figure out the psychology behind how that doctor or nurse got to that point where they were able to do that. And I'm giving you a specific example of the pain management and how they've revised that entire industry and how they treat those patients. But back in the early days, the things that I saw were horrific. Patients coming in fully dependent on these pain meds. Doctors just handing them out like candy, handing them out to anybody who asked for them, handing them out to someone who had a toothache or throat infection, making lots of money on the back end. I remember going to an interview once. I've gone on probably at least 50 interviews where they flew me out to a location and we did an interview. And I ran into one of the guys who sold Oxy. He was in the interview too. I think it was an AstraZeneca that I applied for. I think we were in Texas. If he's listening, he'll remember this conversation. And he came from the company that was selling Oxy. And I'm like, why are you applying for this job? Base salary is only 60 grand a year. Why are you coming from that company who's I know is making a ton of money? He's telling us stories about this. He goes, one bonus, I got a Harley Davidson. I made 6 figures twice last year. I made 200,000. He says, what this guy's telling me. And he's applying for a job at AstraZeneca. And I'm like, And then he told me, he goes, the ship is sinking. Things are changing, and somehow he was on the inside of all this, and he knew things were changing rapidly, and he was jumping ship. So this is the world that many of you don't know about that I'm trying to share with you today. Now, it'd be really easy for somebody like me to run and hide from my past, hoping not to get doxxed, right? Because this is what everyone's afraid of. But I like to look my past straight in the eye, and I always have with you guys. I tell you my weaknesses. I tell you the things that I've done, and moving on from that, and what I do now, and what we do each and every day. Because it's important to address those things, because my past and the mistakes I've made and the journey I've been on is going to help other people not go through those things, won't it? Yes, it will. So, we have the institution. We have what was obviously a huge mistake that our medical establishment is now admitting to. They're admitting they shouldn't have put all these people on pain meds. But where was this admission back when the white papers were saying this is safe and effective and non-addicting? Where was the accountability then? And where is it now? Now, over the course of the Trump presidency, a lot of people were pulled off these medications. Now think of the psychology behind that. Now you've got a person who's been cut off from something they've known for the last 10 years, something that a doctor put them on, they are fully dependent on, and now their entire life's turned upside down as they've become almost criminalized for being on these medications, under intense scrutiny. All these testing protocols were put in place, and all this pressure. Some people maybe weren't ready to get off these meds. Now, I'm not defending that, but what I am saying is you don't understand the grip and hold that these drugs have on these people. And so for them to basically whitewash their mistake and then flip it onto the patients and put all the pressure and drama onto the patients and giving them timelines to get off the meds was wrong. It was wrong. I think every one of those patients put on those meds should have been given $1 million. And it should have come out of the pockets of those pharma companies. And they should have been given $1 million, some kind of incentive to give them the will to fight to get off of these drugs. Because a lot of them ended up dead. A lot of them ended up dead. And you notice where most or much of this assault was levied on, and it was the South. The heartland of America, the freedom lovers of America, were the ones that had the hugest problems with addiction with this, and I think all of that was intentional. It was an assault. And many of you have stories that you could share right now in the chat about people that you love, or maybe even you yourself, that went through this phase of history over the last 25 years. And we're told in the beginning, oh, this is just something temporary to help you feel better. And then found yourself or your loved one either dead, overdosed, or strung out, completely changing the person they were. They became a shell of the person that they were. And many of you were survivors. You got out of that, and you're alive today to tell the story. So yes, this is serious. This is as serious as a heart attack. And never ever diminish a whistleblower's efforts to raise the alarm bells. And shame on the YouTube channels who tried to say that she was a shill. Because people like Brandy and I turned our back on prosperity and six-figure income. In other words, it was like when the devil came to Jesus. Now, I ain't no Jesus, of course. But he offered him the kingdoms of the world. I could have had it all. And I refused. And I instead chose to live the life of a pauper. Under intense scrutiny, daily trolling, threats of YouTube removing my channel. To be here with you to speak the truth. So don't sign up to these channels who try to dismiss legacies like Brandy's. I met her personally when she was a rep. I know for a fact she was a rep. She was not any kind of government agent. I ran into her in Ojai. I took her business card, actually. This was back in the 2000s. And she remembered me just months before she disappeared. So, don't let these YouTube channels climb inside of your head and get you not trusting anybody, because that's exactly what they want. Now, let's keep going with this about these institutions. So we covered the white paper studies and how they are psychologically designed to control the doctor's mind. It's a legal document of authority in many ways. They give the doctor the written permission to prescribe that medication. Then we have federal laws, don't we, that steer doctors' practices. We know this with Medicare and Medi-Cal. Look what they just did to the nurses. They said, well, since it's a Medicare account, or Medi-Cal or whatever, Medi-Cal is California, but Medicare, that's federal, so you have to get the smack the nation. Remember that? So it's an institutional control. There are also medical groups. There are also protocols that doctors have to follow. All these things control what doctors do. And you will be shocked at exactly how much control is in place and how little flexibility a doctor has in prescribing something. And it ends up being a predetermined path that the doctor is led down on how to diagnose and what to prescribe. So, there are all these mind control trigger words that we were taught in sales to further mind control the doctor, which he then mind controls his patients. One of those terms is called handling objections. Now, for those of you that have done any kind of sales, it's Sales 101, right? Handling objections. Another term used is managing expectations. So we were never allowed to admit error or inefficacy or guilt of our drugs. Okay, we always stood on these white papers. We were never allowed to admit to the doctor that our drug didn't work. We were only told to handle the objection so we could flip it around into an opportunity. So they taught us that objections were good things because that means you were in a dialogue with the doctor. That's a buying signal. See how this works? It's all mind control. And so we were taught to manage their expectations after they would decide to start using our drug. So these objections were spun to appear as an opportunity, and it got us into at least a conversation with the doctor about our particular medication, and it was seen as a buying signal. I always wonder where these mind control tactics originated from. Like, there's probably some creepy book, some really old book from like the 1500s or something, that has all this mind control thought processes and manipulation and gaslighting written down in there to basically tell people, you want this poison, don't you? So let's talk a little bit more about managing expectations. So once the doctor started using the med and maybe things didn't go so well or it wasn't working, we had to find a way to pacify the doctor by managing his expectations, right? And then in turn, he would manage the expectations of the patient. Whether it was the cost, sometimes it was the cost that he had anticipated. Maybe it wasn't covered by the insurance as he thought it would be. We would manage expectations. How would we do that? Well, we had some vouchers sometimes. We'd flip him a voucher. Hey, patient can get it for free. Here's the voucher. And the doctor's like, why didn't you give this to me in the beginning? Oh, I'm managing your expectations. Right? Or it was about the reimbursement that the doctor wasn't getting for some kind of procedure or something. They're like, hey, I didn't get reimbursed for this. And so we would have to figure that out. Or maybe it was the side effects the patient was having. We had an answer for everything. And the sign of a good sales rep was a sales rep who could basically dance his way out of any single situation that ever came up. Now, I'm telling you all this because I'm seeing this kind of mind control happening right now in the media, is they're now starting to manage expectations of the public when it comes to the smack the nations. We've all seen it happening over the past couple months as they start to back the car out of the garage about how some of this, what the expectations were versus the reality. And so we're going to get into some of these headlines about this. And you tell me if their tune is starting to change since the beginning of all this. And before we get into this, here's what troubles me. YouTube actually struck a really good video that I still have up on Odyssey, and I'll put the link in the pinned comment. The video is called 20 Spam-demic Predictions That We Made That Came True. Apparently, YouTube did not like that video. But let me tell you this, some of the very same headlines that I'm going to read today were in that video. Now they're finally admitting some of this stuff and acknowledging it. But a year ago when I posted this video, that would get you a strike. So, let's read these updates about the smack the nations as they start to manage expectations. Now, first of all, here's a title. This headline here, USA Today, about the airlines. Now, many of you will be happy to hear this, but they're ditching the face mask. But I want to talk about what's behind this, okay? Because instead of the airlines admitting that the masks were a dumb strategy to begin with, because it brought air travel to a standstill, it almost crashed the airline industry. It spawned division, fear, aggression, in an already over-regulated industry. People had been through enough after Blind 11, getting poked and prodded and processed. And here they dump this on it. What did they expect was going to happen? And now all of a sudden they just get to say we're not going to require it anymore. Again, this is a good thing. But think about this. Even in the face of right now, they're scaring us with fears of multiple variants. Now they're just simply going to drop the requirement? Weird. So maybe they got a new strategy. Maybe they're thinking, oh, let's do this. We've got these people in the cabin of the aircraft, and we'll have everybody take their masks off, and that's going to freak people out. And they're going to be like, I better get a smack the nation. I better get it because someone can make me sick on the plane. Maybe that's their strategy. I don't know. But it's just really weird. Why now? Even while they're starting to still put people in fear about new variants, and it ain't over yet and all this stuff, right? So let me tell you what's really going on here, or what I think's going on. This is my opinion about what's going on. The airline industry was starting to bleed out, wasn't it? Because people realized, rather than just sit in an airport for 5 hours, and I'm talking the flight there and the flight back, and drive time to the airport, 5 hours, for a 2-hour flight to go 500 miles in a stuffy cabin with no legroom, badgered by the masked Yahtzees, with no free meal anymore. All you get is a bag of peanuts. I don't even think they give you that anymore. They give you like 2 pretzels. People are now opting to drive because they can drive the same distance in less time. So the airline shot themselves in the foot, didn't they? When they took the federal dollars with all the rules that went with it, masks being one of them. There's a psychology behind masks, isn't there? I believe that it inherently spawns aggression because people are freaked out that you can't see someone's face and their expressions. If they're smiling or frowning, it conceals the person's identity. It makes you a little bit uneasy. This is why when a masked person walks into a bank with a pop stick, people get freaked out. They used to anyway, and now they basically psychologically forced everyone to accept this behavior across the nation for daily activities. Of course, it's going to spawn aggression. And this is why you saw all these people flipping out in these airlines, didn't you? And then, of course, masks evolved into the liberal version of a MAGA hat, didn't it? The red hats. It became the pushback. It became the answer to the MAGA hat. Well, you're going to wear that? Well, we're going to wear this. This is the world we live in today, you guys. Now, managing expectations, right? Vidco smack scenes are not meant to prevent all infections. Really? This is out of USA Today. You think? Let's read this. Americans need to reset their expectations. Managing expectations. Let's read this. Danny Mitchell couldn't believe he tested positive for Vidco in January. The 45-year-old from Houston never left the house without his mask. He avoided indoor dining at all costs. Most important, he was fully smacked in the face of the nation. But he still got sick. I was surprised because I was taking so many precautions, he said. I followed all the rules. It's no longer unusual to hear of someone getting Vidco even after they're fully smacked in the nation and boosted out of their booster seat. Yet many Americans are still shocked when it happens to them. Early data showed that the smack scenes were highly effective against infection, but experts say the virus has changed over time. Oh, it's the virus's fault. And people need to reconfigure their expectations or manage their expectations. This is shocking, you guys. I can't believe I have to read this. Now, we were saying all this, once again, let me repeat, and I'm going to link the video, the ODYSEE video, for you to see. We were saying all this, but when we said it, we got beat down and struck out. But now they're saying they can say it all they want now because they're trying to manage your expectations now, aren't they? The smack scenes may not prevent all infection, but they still protect against the worst consequences of the disease, you dummy. You should have listened closer. That's what we need to emphasize, says Philip Chan, an infectious disease specialist. The fact that these smack scenes are still effective against these emerging variants in terms of severe disease, hospitalizations, and death is definitely a public health win. Okay, whatever you say. Americans' high expectations of the Vidco smack scene stem from initial clinical trials. For the smack scenes to obtain blah, blah, blah. So now you see what's happening here. They call this moving the goalpost, don't they? They hope that people forget the past and just move forward to the future, and they just keep moving the goalpost. Look at this one. The false spam-demic of the unsmackcinated motto did lasting harm. Again, something we were saying in the beginning. Let's read this. 2 full years have come and gone since the Vidco spam-demic came to the U.S. and turned things upside down. For most of us, life has now pretty much returned to normal. For those of us, the inference here is for those of us that got smacked the nation, there's reason to hope that it will stay that way too. At the time of this writing, Vidco and the hospitalization had decreased in recent weeks. We learned a lot about things relative to this Vidco and the spam-demic it caused. Various treatments for the disease, public policy for its prevention, and against its spread and the development and the distribution of smack scenes. Notice how they just whitewash this. They don't talk about how they threaten people's jobs, fired a bunch of people, forced people to stay home, shuttered small businesses all across America. They don't talk about all that. They're trying to whitewash history, aren't they? But a number of these matters need to be discussed with regard to what we did right and what we did wrong in response to the spam-demic. So we're just going to have a powwow here and sit down with the counselor, and we'll all have some healing with no consequences. One of the most important of these, in my views, is the public perception of vaccine efficacy. Back in early November of 2020, the companies announced that they had demonstrated 95% effective 1 week after the second dose. By effective, they meant that the vaccinated individual was protected from infection for a period of time. And that was, no doubt, how it was understood by everyone who heard the news. So they're basically admitting to some funny business here, aren't they? By the following summer, Bo Jiven, unhappy with how Americans were still unvaccinated, called the continued spread of the VidCo a spam-demic of the unvaccinated. Remember that? Remember we got the bad boy label? We got our nose stuck in a corner. Remember that? And that spawned all this hatred against people like us. Way to go, Bo Jiven. Divide, divide, divide the country. Get us all turned on each other instead of looking at you and the horrible job you're doing. Now, the narrative was simple. Get vaccinated and you won't get sick. Don't get vaccinated, and not only can you get sick, but you will be a threat to everybody else. Remember, they were making us feel horrible. You're killing people. You should be, hit with some kind of charges. There should be charges against you. Remember all this fear they were pushing out there? Now, I'm proud of the people that stood up, that didn't give into that fear, because a lot of people would give into that fear. They'd be like, I don't want to be legally liable for someone else's death. I better just go get it. Then they try. I don't really blame Bo Jiven for promoting this sort of thing at the time. I suspect he was saying more or less what he'd been told. Wow. But it was enormously divisive to the country. Yes, it was. And it was also factually incorrect. So now they get to say this, but we can't. It's true that these vaccines are very effective. Blah, 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 blah. More brainwashing. Managing expectations. Now, this next article is interesting because we've been talking a lot about blue-blooded sea creatures of the ocean, haven't we? And some of you got me up to date on and up to speed on jellyfish, because they are hemocyanin blue-blooded based creatures as well. Saw a lot of this in the fireworks display, New Year's Eve fireworks display at the Seattle Space Needle, didn't we? We saw squids and jellyfish and blue-blooded sea creatures. Well, there's something to all that, I believe, because now they're claiming here that the ocean will be the origin of 5,500 new viruses. And this begs the question, will the next supervirus emerge from the depths of the ocean, or will they say it emerges from the depths of the ocean? Though we've yet to explore 80% of the world's oceans, a new finding is shedding light on what lurks within the Earth's water. Sounds like something out of a bad X-Files episode, doesn't it? The research published Thursday in the peer-reviewed journal Science found so many different types of Rhina viruses that the team now propose 5 new phyla. So they're making all these new species up of viruses, and they're classifying them, and they want us to have now a fear of the ocean. That something creepy and dark is going to come out of the ocean and make us all sick. This sounds to me like a setup of something that they are planning, doesn't it? Sure does to me. Now, let's pop into this next story. Here's an update on the Crapper Hole. The January 6th Crapper Hole event. And here, judge says that cops let this guy in. Now again, if you claim this a week after it happened, you'd have been canceled on social media platforms, right? Let's read why this judge acquitted this guy, and then we're going to read what the Checker said last year after it happened. U.S. judge acquits Crapper Hole defendant who said he was waved in by the police. Federal judge on Wednesday found former Energy Department contract engineer not guilty of trespassing, disorderly conduct, saying the defendant plausibly argued that police officers allowed him into the building. Martin, who testified in his own defense, argued that he had never visited the U.S. Crapper Hole before and did not know it was off limits. Protesters. So, his defense was he was waved in, he got acquitted by the judge, and they're saying here that these findings could encourage some defendants in other prosecutions who have made similar claims to contest their charges. Now, what kind of evidence could have surfaced at this trial to show that this guy was waved in? Wow. Let's see if there was a video in here. McFadden ruled that while U.S. prosecutors had shown that Martin more likely than not knew he was not supposed to go into the Crapper Hole, the actions of the U.S. Crapper Hole police at a key entrance to the building created a reasonable doubt. So the judge saw reasonable doubt. But if you or I see reasonable doubt, oh, sorry, cancel culture. You're gone. You're out of here. At the time the defendant was on the scene, officers were standing beside the doors to let people pass. McFadden said, referring to the Columbus doors at the top of the East Capitol, I said it, Crapper Hole steps. So, reasonable doubt. Here's what the Chuckers say. That video doesn't prove Crapper Hole police allowed them into the Capitol. Shame on you. And you're going to get a strike if you do not agree with us. So, here's a whole article. Look at all this. Just a whole article of horseradish. So, that's the update on the Crapper Hole. Now, let's get into Booty Gig, because I love to talk about him, because I always really mess his name up, and I'm not doing it on purpose, but it really looks like his name is Booty Gig, doesn't it? And he's talking out of places he shouldn't be talking out of. What is he doing? He's disrespecting the trucker movement, claiming that they only represent a fringe minority. Now, where have we heard of that before? Trudeau? Same playbook. All these people are on the same page. And you know what's crazy is that seemed to work for Trudeau. You know, oh, these are just fringe people. This isn't everybody. Now, of course, not every single trucker is going to be able to show up to these kinds of protests. So this assertion that this does not represent the majority of people is a cop-out. It's like trying to say that an MLK march doesn't represent how all black people feel, or most black people feel. Of course, not every single black person is going to show up to an MLK march. So, Booty Gig gets a fail on this one. Sorry, dude. Now, as we start to wind down the show here, hats off to the patrons at Colton's Steakhouse in Kentucky. Now, people are upset because when they go to a steakhouse, they don't want politics sprinkled all over it, do they? 12-ounce ribeye with a side of barbecue. Hold the politics, please. People are tired of getting shamed because they don't buy into the programming. So there was this flag outside of this Kentucky restaurant that Colton's put up, and it got a frenzy of complaints, as you can see here. Oh, here's the flag here. You can see it. And people just don't want to deal with this while they're eating their steak and baked potato. General manager of Kentucky Steakhouse said the restaurant has been flooded with complaints after it put up a nuclear crane flag outside its business. Located in Bardstown, previously displayed 2 Texas flags on the exterior of the restaurant, but switched to a nuke crane flag shortly after the country. Blah, blah, blah. Residents of the rural Kentucky town thought the restaurant had replaced an American flag, not a Texas flag. People start sending me screenshots and reading hateful sentiments. Well, they better watch out. They're probably going to cancel culture now on Facebook. Unbelievable. So, Colton's joining the political messaging. Wow. Well, I know what I would do if I was in this town. There's got to be some other steakhouses around. They're going to become real popular after this. So let me go back into the chat here. That's pretty much what I wanted to show you guys today. Getting caught up on some of these headlines. You know, edification through understanding the manipulation that we're coming under and the attack, and understanding that you're not crazy, okay? When you get upset about these things, you're not crazy. And that's why we do these between the headlines shows, so that everybody can, you know, have some encouragement. Now, tomorrow, one of you found another smack scene needle in the landscape. Let me click on that. This is crazy. This is the Eiffel Tower, and this is the Maritime Museum. And there you see what appears to be another smack scene needle, right? This is actually not a needle. It's like I guess there's a difference between a syringe and a needle. Syringes are like less sharp. I don't know. There's some vernacular that goes behind all this. But here's the Eiffel Tower. It forms the tip of the needle. And here you have, these are called finger something. I forgot what they're called. And this looks just like it. So we're going to get into that tomorrow. So more confirmation. We're finding these things all over the planet now. In the developed nations. Confirming that it's always been about the needle. And we're going to talk about why this building was made. It was actually for a World's Fair in France, in Paris. And we're going to talk about what was at that World's Fair. And that it came out right after the invention of the syringe. The hollow tip needle. So, and then we're also going to get into Artemis Fowl, which is a really poorly made superhero movie. Which children rule the world and make adults look stupid. And we're not going to cover too much of it, but I have a few clips I want to show you tomorrow from Artemis Fowl. Artemis, of course, was the twin sister of Apollo. And that was like huge because we found out that she is also the maker of disease and the cure of disease. Now, I'm debating on whether or not I should re-upload a full decode that I did on Omega Man. And we had identified Thump as the Omega Man. And if you guys want me to re-upload that, I will re-upload that on the weekend for like a special show. I'll set it up for Saturday and we can watch it all together. If you want me to re-upload Omega Man, a full decode on that film from the 1970s, I can do that. Because there was so much about Apollo and Omega Man and a spamdemic that turned everybody into zombies, and it just keeps going on and on and on. So, what do you guys think? Should I re-upload that on Saturday? Will you guys show up for that? All right, let me look in the chat here. All right. Now, amazingly, the film Artemis Fowl really didn't have a lot to do with what we had uncovered so far. It was more a movie about portals. And a lot of the stuff that we had already covered about portals, that they're through tree stumps and volcanoes. And so we're going to cover all that. So yeah, it looks like everybody, that was a popular upload. Nobody could find it. I couldn't find it. It took me an hour to find that video. I put it under a different title. It was under the title of like Dunce Day, because we're looking at Dunce Day. Because in the film, Omega Man, Charlton Heston gets paraded out with a dunce cap on. And I'm like, I've seen that dunce cap before. That's from iPad Go 2. And then I was like, wait a minute. Dunce Day was Election Day. When Thump got elected. That was Dunce Day on the calendar. So we cover all that in the video. So that's what I'll do. I'll upload that on the weekend. We can all watch that together. All right. What else you guys want to talk about today? That's pretty much it for the headlines. Now, let me say a few more words about the film Omega Man, because Charlton Heston was in the film. And this film, Omega Man, was the basis for the film I Am Legend. And this is why it's probably important to re-upload that film, or that decode. Because I Am Legend, now, if you haven't heard, is going for a part 2. I Am Legend Part 2 is now in production. Will Smith and Michael B. Jordan are going to be in that film. And I Am Legend was all about a Dr. Neville, a Colonel Dr. Neville, Colonel meaning Corona, of course, who uses his own convalescent plasma to cure a zombie apocalypse. Sound familiar? It should, because it's exactly what happened at the beginning of the spam-demic. Remember Hom Tanks was given his convalescent plasma? Remember that whole thing? Well, history repeats itself, doesn't it? And the opening scene of Omega Man, Charlton Heston is driving around in this red Shelby Mustang convertible. Just like Will Smith was, the opening scenes was driving around all by himself in the entire world with a red Cobra Mustang. So the films are almost identical to one another. Charlton Heston is held up in his mansion as he tries to find a cure using his own blood to cure the zombies. And the same thing happens in I Am Legend, as Will Smith is held up in his mansion trying to cure the world of the zombies. So, lots of connections, and there's so much more. So I'll re-upload that and we'll all watch it together. We'll probably learn something, because that decode was from several years ago. So, all right. Okay. So they said Will Smith lost his future role because of the slap. I wonder if they pulled him from I Am Legend 2. That's a good question. Good question. Federal employees have their rights overturned. Must be smack the nation. Yep. UN. All the zombies in I Am Legend are bald. Yes, the bald connection as well. I found a few more things on the bald thing as well, and so we'll cover all that tomorrow when we do Artemis Fowl. Yeah, I'm tired of hearing about the war as well. This is why we don't really cover it anymore. In fact, I got a notification from YouTube saying that they're going to unmonetize any video that is not sensitive to the war, or tries to dismiss it, or tries to side with the other side. Wow, here we are, you guys. We're in an age, this is a very scary time, because, yeah, it's a war, and there's a lot worse things that this could be about, in terms of censorship, but it's going to spread out to everything. I was just talking to my son yesterday, and he was telling me, Dad, he said, a lot of people get strikes on YouTube in the gaming community too, and they get cancel cultured. They have to be very careful what they say on a gaming channel. I was like, are you serious? He's like, yeah, it's happening everywhere. And then I realized, I go, this is not just the truth community getting cancel cultured and silenced and censored, you guys. It's across the board. Anybody that has influence. Now, we are a very small footprint on this platform compared to some of these channels. He showed me a channel he follows yesterday with like 2 million subscribers. And it's just a guy gets on in games and jokes around. And he's like, yeah, these guys they catch strikes all the time for, shooting their mouth off about things. And so this is huge, you guys. This is everywhere. What happened to Monday on Netflix? Lots of umbrellas. Thanks, Appalachian Mountains. Okay. I always appreciate your suggestions of things to decode. Based on some of your suggestions, I've got a couple things in the queue here. I've got Outer Range and a series or a movie, and I've got Choose or Die. These are all just brand new productions out that I should decode for you guys. They use the gaming industry as influence. Yeah, so a lot of these top gamers are fully controlled as well. They have to be very careful what they say. If they say something that could come across as racist, they could get their entire channel removed. You guys, it's getting crazy. See, here's what happened. It used to be to publish anything that reached lots and lots of people, you had to be some kind of production studio and have marketing behind you in this whole machine. And, a television station, distribution. But now we live in a new world where anybody, well, not so much anybody anymore, but in the beginning, 10 years ago when I started, anybody could create content, and very quickly, if even the lamest truth channels on YouTube were, sitting at 150,000 subscribers within 2 or 3 years, channels that weren't even really offering much in the way of real content, or copycat channels. And those days are pretty much over because the algorithms have suppressed content, and also YouTube has become impacted. What that means is there are so many people creating content and not enough people watching the content to where it's not in really a growth mode anymore. So all YouTube channels are fighting for viewers because people are distracted because there's so much content out there to watch. You can watch content on Twitch, you can watch content on all these other platforms, and then you got a lot of people that have learned to make videos. Now, this is not an easy job, what I do. And many of you that have been here from the beginning of this channel from 10 years ago, you've seen our production value go up tremendously. We've learned new tricks of how to create things, create videos. We've got better sound. I finally broke down and bought a microphone. But in the early days of this channel, we used to speak right into the laptop, and it had a particular sound to it. In fact, my first computer was a tablet, like a little Acer tablet, and a little tiny thing. And this is what I did all my decoding from. Well, as time goes on, YouTube gets more competitive. People don't put up with poor sound quality. People don't put up with, not to some degree being entertained. Now, I hate that about how our society has gotten to that point. But in order to keep up with the times, I have to up my game, right? I have to up how I do this. And sometimes I don't want to do that. Sometimes I just want to talk to you guys. Or sometimes I just want to do a simple video without putting all this effort into editing and all these things. But I realize that you have to go by what they do, because if you don't do that, you'll get left behind. For instance, I just had to add end screens to all my videos. And what that does is it shows you the next video to go to on my channel. By not doing that, less people go to other videos on my channel. You see how that works? I didn't want to have to do that, but you have to do that to keep up with the times. And so there's this whole production that happens behind the scenes. And that's not even including the research, the inspiration by the Holy Spirit, and trying to keep my ear open to that and being guided by it. That doesn't include all the comments I go through to try to, gather all of your research so that I can incorporate that into my research. So this is a huge job. And if several of you know, even sometimes when you send me an email, I will take a second to at least try to acknowledge that I got your email. Not every time, because I get sometimes 400 or 500 emails in a day, but as much as I can. So this is what I'm trying to tell you, is this is a huge job. And there's knowledge that comes behind this. You have to learn how to work these, this stuff. This is OBS. It's a broadcaster. You have to learn how to work all this stuff, and there's settings. And so I woke up one day and I realized that I'm like, wow, this is a full-time job. This is huge. Now, it's different for someone that maybe uploads once a week, but we upload every day. So this is a daily thing. Tammy says there's trolls in here. Okay, who's the troll? Name the troll. Now it's time, at the end of the show, it's always time to take out the trash, right? All right. Okay. Call them out, you guys. Call them out. So that's just a little behind the scenes stuff. Sometimes people think we pop on here and it's just a happy howdy doody show, and I spend an hour a day and I make, video. That's not what happens, you guys. It's not what happens. This is a full-time thing, to the point where I have to literally drag myself away from it to even go out and fish for an hour. So, okay, who's the troll? Creep trolls. Let's see here. Yeah, my son was telling me too. He's like, yeah, there's trolls in all this stuff, Dad. There's trolls, and he plays all these games, and he's like, there's trolls in all of our stuff too. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. So he got a little job down at a bobo shop. I guess it's like tapioca balls. I'd never heard of this before. And so he loves it. This kid has some, what do they call that? He is really motivated, you know? He was here for a few months, and I'm like, son, what do you want to do? He's like, I don't know. Figure it out. I'm like, all right. And I go, let's drive around. Let me show you around downtown here, and you can figure out what you want to do. We drove around like one day, like literally for like 45 minutes. Went to the downtown. He goes, I want something close to the house. I said, all right. Because boom, that's where I want to work. It was a bobo shop. It hadn't opened yet. They were remodeling it. He goes, that's the place I want to work at. I said, all right, cool. So he went in. Now, never in my entire life have I walked into a job. Actually, one time that happened. My very first job in pharmaceutical sales, I walked in and I got that job. But any other time in my life when I needed a job, I was never able to get a job. And as you guys know, when you're applying for jobs, trying to get jobs, it is frustrating. It undermines your self-worth when you get rejected over and over and over again, especially when you put a lot of effort into it. So here goes Max, walks in, meets the owners. Boom, they're training him on the day he walks in, and he's working like the day after that. 30 hours a week, making like $15 an hour. I'm like, way to go, dude. So he's on track. He likes it here. It's walking distance, but usually I give him a ride to work because I hadn't been a part of his life much. And so I'm like, I want to do something for my son, I'm going to let him stay here, and I'm going to, get him back and forth to work and just give him a break in life. He had way too much responsibility from too early of an age to be, and so I'm just glad I'm here for him, So there's a lot going on. And that's the personal side of my life. There's more to it. I don't share everything with you guys, but I share with you what I feel is, what I want to share with you. Okay. Now, someone said that Max needs a bicycle. I don't know. Lori wrote off. A lot of people are getting prostate issues and testicular issues from bikes. So, unless I get him one of those, bikes with the big old like granny seat on it, but he's not going to ride that. But okay, let's go in here. I'm all over the place today. I'm sorry, you guys, but we just needed just like a low-key day today, I think. And I hope you guys enjoyed the time we get to spend together here. So someone said there was a troll. Let's see here. All right. Yeah, so you guys want to hear? So a funny story. So he's got these bobo balls in the bottom of in this drink, right? If you guys have ever seen anything like this, they look like little balls. Now, to me, when I first saw one of these, I was like, that's disgusting. I don't want little things floating around in my drink. But apparently this is very popular. It's like the new Starbucks thing, And basically, he had a customer come in and complain that they had too many bobo balls. And he's like, why don't you just not stick the straw in the bottom of the cup? Like, he's like, people are so weird. I'm like, I know, son, but it's the world we live in now. He's always got little stories he shares with me when I pick him up from work about the bobo drama. So yeah, thanks, Chris. Chris said there was this Will Smith in a movie killed himself with a jellyfish. And someone else had mentioned that to me as well. So I forget what movie that was. Let's see here. Danny says, my sister loves that stuff. Yeah, they're tapioca balls. One time we had a lady come in, and they were closed. They had run out of bobo balls. And she was like, we don't have any more. It takes an hour to make them. And the lady's like, I'll wait. And he's like, we ran out. There are no more bobo balls. And she's like, I'll wait. And it's like some people are just, I guess you call it entitled. She came there and wanted her boba drink. And he's like, we're not going to make an entire batch of boba balls just to throw 3/4 of it out and make you your drink. So, funny, right? Boba balls. Have you guys ever had one of these drinks before? 7 Pounds is the movie where Will Smith killed himself with a jellyfish. Okay, I might have to look at that movie again. I think I screened that years ago when it came out, but so much has happened since then, hasn't it? King's daughter said it's called bubble tea in Canada. Yes. Yeah, and when Max got here, he's like, "Yeah, Dad." He goes, "These are popular in California. It's kind of cool to see one here." I was like, "All right, right on." It's kind of a tongue twister, huh? Bobo balls, bobo. I don't know. Probably easier just to call it bubble tea. That's easier to say, I guess. Green tea with bobas. I think it's Taiwan or Vietnamese was the origins of these drinks. Trisha says, do you miss France? I do miss France. I will tell you, I miss France. But there was no way to stay there. As you guys saw, the world completely changed. Luckily, I got out of there just in the nick of time, right before the yellow vest started popping off, and then shortly after that, the spam-demic. But I do miss that place. I do miss it. It's very isolated, I will tell you that, because, most people cannot stop their lives to come out without any form of income and, basically be out there. And so it was somewhat isolated. And so that's the one drawback that I would say. And it was so far from home. So it was so far from my mother and my children. But I do miss it. I miss the chickens. I miss the farm. I miss the lake house. I miss the giant murder hornets. Even those I miss, who were dive bombing me while I was trying to trim the hedges. So, yeah, I do miss it. But, will we ever have a world where we could return to something like that? I know Mark's very disenfranchised about it. He's got negative feelings when I talk to him about it, because he got burned, they're still charging him, taxes on these properties, thousands and thousands of dollars a year for properties he can't even visit unless he gets smacked upside the head with the nation. So he's very upset about it. He didn't ask for those properties. His dad gave them to him, and he shares those with his sister. So, it's just a lot of good memories, but then also it was unsustainable, I guess you could say. So I do want to remind everybody, if someone is offensive to you or you feel like they're trolling, you have the right to go and block them on your own. You just hit these 3 dots on the side, and that helps keep the chat moving along rather than us, mad at each other or whatever about something that may have offended you. So just go ahead and block that person. You don't have to see what they're saying. And if everybody does that, then the person will just be not being seen by anybody, right? They'll just be talking to themselves. Yeah, I feel sorry for Mark too, Susie. He's been through a lot, That's why I try to be forgiving. When he came in, he was a little upset in the chat when he came in, and, things had changed. The channel grew a lot, and I think it just took him by surprise, and he kind of acted out a little bit. I think there was a little bit of a jealousy thing going on between him and Tom. They were kind of telling on each other. It just dealing with all this stuff, and I love both of those guys, but it's like, come on, guys, and I'm spending hours on this. I need to be decoding stuff. I can't be dealing with this stuff, so, and people have feelings. I understand that, but sometimes you just gotta it's about respect, right? I try to respect everyone, and I expect that in return, Don't come to my channel and say this is a circus and start, trolling people when you're a moderator. Don't come onto my channel and moderate and then ask for $2,000 a month. Come on, guys. Like, we're all supposed to be adults here. Now, I'm not perfect. You guys have seen me lose it sometimes. I'm just saying that there's a lot to deal with here, okay? This isn't the easy show. All right. Not that Mark. Mark Grinder. My other friend Mark. Anyway, I love those guys, and I haven't talked to Mark in a while, but Tom, I forgive him, but I'm still a little upset at him, so probably not going to see him for a while. Not to say he might not come back, but all right. Enough of that. But I'd like to update you guys on everything, so that you're not in the dark or asking questions that you don't know the answers to. So, yes, forgive. We should always forgive. Yeah. I'll tell you a funny story. I'm telling on people today, aren't I? When I was in France toward the end, and Mark forgave me for this, but I was upset because Mark's like, I'm gonna send this guy. This guy wants to come out there and stay with you. And I'm like, okay, well, is he gonna help out with the bills? And I'm like, he's like, no. And I'm like, well, is he gonna do some yard work? And he's like, no. And I'm like, Mark, well, then why are you sending him out here to live with me? No, I can't take care of this guy. Many of you will know who this guy is. The Pharaoh guy that talks about the pharaohs all the time. What's his name? Gire. Anyway, Gire at one time was going to be my roommate in France. And I got upset at Mark. I got a little bit territorial after a while. I'm like, Mark, all these years we've had an open door policy, and this is the guy you choose to be my roommate. Now, I don't have anything against Gire, but I'll tell you this. In that little town I was in, this guy likes to walk around without a shirt on, and he's in videos toting a pistol, and I'm like, dude, you can't do that around here. You're going to get us both kicked out of here. Anyway, Gary did not end up showing up because we were too north in France, and it was cold up there. He wanted to spend his time in the south of France. Now, again, I'm not saying this as saying anything bad about Gire, but I'm just telling you how social dynamics work sometime. And Mark was like a little puzzled as to why I did not want Gary to come out. And so he forgave me for that because I was acting out a little bit. I'll admit, I got a little territorial. But you know what? If you're going to come out, dude, you got to at least help kick down for some of the utilities or do some yard work. You can't just expect to come in here have a warm bed and, just be cruising along, So, so I thought I would tell you guys that story. All right, let's go back into the chat. I like Gary's work. He's got a lot of good work. He's probably the original guy who really was, in my mind, solidified the whole root of all of the world elite leadership, which is, in fact, the pharaohs. He was right about that. He was absolutely right about that. And so that stuck in my mind. And even though, you hear him repeating it over and over again, Pharaoh, the Pharaoh, the Pharaoh, he was actually right. Like, this all goes back to that. These are the bloodlines, the pharaonic bloodlines. And I'm seeing that now too. And his work and my work overlap. Now, Gire does a lot of touring. So he goes all throughout Europe and he films all of these old, buildings and old Swiss Templar, all that stuff. He films it all. And at first, it looks like he's just making stuff up. But then after you watch him for a while, you're like, whoa, like that overlapped with that. And that's connected to that. And all of this makes sense. It all makes sense. So I'm not saying anything bad about his work. But the living situation thing probably wasn't going to work out in terms of us being roommates. And nor does he like to stay in one spot anyway. He likes to move around all of Europe, So, all right. Okay, you guys, I've run my mouth long enough. You guys are probably tired of listening to me. We'll be back on here tomorrow. I love each and every one of you guys. I hope you guys have a great day. Take care and be safe.